1 minute ago, Ice Cube connects. Diddy, Oprah, and Jamie Foxx exposed. Courtroom. Left speechless. Before we begin, please be advised what follows is intended purely for educational and entertainment purposes. This is a direct account of federal courtroom testimony from the trial of Sean Diddy Combs, as documented by Inner City Press. No one anticipated his arrival. The court had already heard from Cassie Will Smith Monique and several others. Everything shifted the moment Ice Cube entered the courtroom. A man known for building his name on defiance now stood face to face with the very system he once sidestepped. But this time he didn't avoid it, he walked straight through it. Cube wasn't there seeking fame or headlines. That wasn't why he came. He came to speak under oath. And what he carried, evidence, audio clips, a list of names and intricate connections, left the entire courtroom in stunned silence. This wasn't merely about Diddy anymore. It had become a window into a hidden network, a machine of power, coercion, and abuse, maintained by the very figures society has been taught to admire. The whispers that once floated around, names like Jamie Foxx, Oprah Winfrey, and Quincy Jones, now had something they never had before: confirmation from someone who had seen it up close. And that someone was Ice Cube. What should have been a routine day in court turned into a turning point. Outside news crews kept their lenses focused. Inside journalists flipped through notes, and Diddy's attorneys forced composure, straightening their ties while the foundation beneath them quietly cracked. Then the courtroom doors swung open and in came Ice Cube. No security detail, no media announcement. Just him holding a plain manila folder, eyes fixed straight ahead, moving with the quiet intensity of someone who had waited a long time for this exact moment. A ripple of murmurs swept through the room. A few jurors shifted in their seats, now fully alert. Even the judge reclined slightly, as if bracing for whatever was about to unfold. Diddy kept his head down at first, but when he finally glanced up and saw who had entered, the blood seemed to drain from his face. "I wasn't summoned," Cube said calmly. "I asked to be here." The judge gave a nod. And then came the voice, measured, weighty. There was no performance in it, just truth. His words carried the weight of decades, like truths that had been buried beneath the surface of hip-hop, finally rising to speak. And the first thing he said was, "Some of you never noticed I was never part of their circle. That's what made them angry." The room went still. Cube wasn't speaking as an entertainer, not as a rapper or a movie star. He spoke as someone who had walked through the fire, seen others consumed by it, and had come back to tear the veil down. He started with the circle, that unspoken elite everyone knows exists, but no one dares to name. The ones who appear friendly in public while quietly pulling the strings in private. The ones behind the curtain shaping the narrative. They don't bring you in because they admire you, Cube said calmly. They bring you in to keep you on a leash. And the moment you refuse, that's when the game begins. His eyes drifted toward Diddy, now clearly unsettled. That's when the quiet threats begin. The meetings that vanish. The headlines that twist the truth. The scandals that come out of nowhere. The phone calls you'll never know were made. The room was silent, every ear locked on his voice. Cube explained he had watched this cycle repeat itself for years. Genuine talents, people with soul and purpose, lured in with promises and privilege. Then the demand came. Submit, comply, sign the deal. Play their role. And if you didn't, they erased you from the board. He didn't just hint, he named Diddy not as a participant, but as a leader in that machinery. Then he stopped speaking, letting the weight of it all settle. The judge asked if he needed a moment to pause. Ice Cube simply shook his head and turned back toward the jury. "You want to know why I came forward?" he asked. "Because they went after someone I deeply respect, Jamie Foxx." The room froze. The sound of pens scribbling stopped mid-sentence. All eyes shifted toward Cube. He said, "It always begins the same way: fake camaraderie, open doors, glittering parties, and phone calls from people you never imagined would reach out." Jamie was on the rise, his talent obvious, his presence electric. And that's exactly when they moved in. "It starts with compliments," Cube said. "Then come the small asks. and before you know it, they're pulling your strings. He told the jury that Jamie had come to him more than once quietly, cautiously, and with a fear he tried to hide. They welcome you like your family, play along and you're a genius. But if you don't... He paused, letting the silence speak volumes. Cube described the infamous basketball nights, the kind that required guests to leave their phones at the door, where black SUVs came and went, and where the people in attendance weren't always who they claimed to be. It wasn't about the game, he said. It was a filter. They wanted to know who you'd follow, who you'd question, and who you'd protect without being asked. He explained that Jamie kept things light, smiling, joking, never causing a scene but never completely surrendering. And that's when it all began. The whispers. Suddenly he's labeled difficult. Suddenly questions about his health pop up. He fades from real headlines, only to reappear in gossip columns framed with suspicion. Cube stated plainly that what happened to Jamie in 2023, the sudden medical crisis, wasn't random. It wasn't bad luck. It was a message. A carefully packaged consequence disguised as a health scare. He claimed Diddy's inner circle didn't just host exclusive events, they documented them. Hidden cameras, private recordings, moments captured without consent. And once they had the footage, it was stored archived, and when necessary, weaponized. He told the jury about a call he once received from Jamie shortly after one of Diddy's gatherings. Cube didn't go into specifics, but he said the fear in Jamie's voice told him everything. He said, "Cube, I can't tell you what I saw, but I can't forget it either." If the courtroom hadn't been shocked before it was now, because the very next name Cube uttered was one that few expected to hear Oprah. It wasn't just Puff, Cube said. This goes deeper, layer after layer. He described a moment during the peak of Jamie's career, right after Ray, just before the Oscar momentum really hit. That's when Jamie got a quiet call from Oprah. According to Cube, her tone wasn't celebratory. She didn't call to congratulate him. She said, "You're messing this up." Cube remained steady as he spoke, showing no hesitation. He said Jamie was caught off guard. He'd expected praise, not a warning. Instead, she told him to get back in line. Then she added that she was taking him to meet someone who could help. That someone, Cube said, was Quincy Jones. And he didn't have to elaborate. If you're in Hollywood, he told the jury, you already know who Quincy is. Cube described Quincy as a man with two faces, honored in public but spoken of with unease behind closed doors. On the surface, he's a legend, Cube said. But behind the curtain, people tread carefully around his name. He told the court that Oprah brought Jamie to Quincy's home under the pretense of guidance, like it was some kind of intervention. But according to Cube, it wasn't about healing. It was about control. Jamie told me it was the most unsettling night he'd ever experienced. Cube said Jamie didn't feel supported. He felt like he was being molded, like they weren't trying to help him. They were trying to reshape him. He never shared every detail of what happened that night, but Cube remembered the look on his face when he tried to. That look, Cube said, told me everything I needed to know. Then Cube leaned forward, his voice lowering with weight. Oprah called it responsibility. Quincy framed it as legacy. But Cube told the jury what they were really offering. Jamie wasn't guidance, it was a leash. He said everything shifted after that visit. Jamie didn't start acting different out of choice, but out of survival. He told me straight, Cube said. The only way to make it in this game and stay breathing is to act like you're playing along. And Cube watched him do exactly that for years. He paused, letting the weight of those words settle, but now he said, "No one's faking anymore." Without flinching, Cube brought up the next name again, this time with deliberate precision. Quincy Jones, he said, letting the words hang in the air. He's not just a music legend in this town, he's the godfather. The courtroom froze, no movement, no murmurs, not even a breath. Then Cube looked to the judge and added firmly, "This isn't rumor, this is truth. This is the truth," Cube said firmly. "And it needs to be part of the official record." He explained to the jury that Quincy's name had been spoken in hushed tones for decades, celebrated in public but spoken about with caution in private. As for why that fear existed, Cube said that's the part most people only allude to in lyrics and cryptic interviews, never out loud. He leaned in, slightly voice steady. You don't rise to Quincy's level without striking certain kinds of deals, he said. And I'm not talking about money or contracts. I'm talking about exchanges deeper than that. The kind where control is the currency and your soul is the cost. Cube testified that Jamie Foxx's meeting with Quincy wasn't coincidence. It wasn't spontaneous. It had been arranged carefully. That wasn't a meeting, he said. It was a handoff. Cube said it was clear Jamie wasn't being mentored. He was being transferred from one handler to the next. The courtroom was still, no one dared to move. Jamie told me later, Cube continued, that wasn't guidance. That was a set of instructions. Quincy might have wrapped it in the language of mentorship, but Jamie felt it for what it really was. He was being processed, not supported. Cube testified that he'd heard versions of the same story from other men in the industry, ones who suddenly disappeared from the public eye, who rebranded themselves overnight or quietly unraveled and were never seen again. He said Quincy had his own way, soft-spoken, charismatic, but beneath the charm, the warning was identical to Diddy's "follow the script, or we'll make sure your career ends right here." Then Cube shared something even more unsettling. He said over the years he'd come across old photos, private ones, images that quietly made their way through trusted circles, never meant to be seen publicly, and in nearly every one Quincy was there smiling in the background. But the others in those photos, their faces told a different story, blank, tense, or visibly distressed. Cube admitted he couldn't verify every detail behind those images, but what he could say with certainty was this: Quincy's not just a mentor, he's a broker, and the ones he's working for, we still don't even know who they are. Cube straightened his posture and looked directly at the jury. Let's talk about how they keep people silent, he said, because it's not just fear, it's leverage. He explained that Diddy's influence didn't just come from fame or fortune. His real control came from what he knew and what he kept on people. It's about what he kept, Cube said. The recordings, the files, years of secrets captured from parties, recording studios, private flights, and hotel suites. All of it cataloged, neatly stored, and never erased. He told the court that these weren't just social gatherings, they were setups. They don't just invite you to the party, he said. They document you while you're there. Turning to the prosecution, Cube asked, you want to know why so many people stayed silent? Ask how many received a flash drive, no name, no return address, just a file. Ask how many picked up a blocked call only to hear a recording of themselves, doing something they didn't even remember. Ask how many saw their careers vanish after saying no. And Jamie, he wasn't alone. Cube said he personally knew of at least 2 other actors who had been compromised, caught up in what happened at one of Diddy's infamous events. Cube said one of those actors reached out to him in a panic. He couldn't remember anything after midnight, but he'd woken up in a hotel room, a contract placed neatly on the table, and disturbing photos on his phone that he didn't take and didn't recognize. Cube told the jury, once they've got something on you, that's it. You're not your own anymore. You belong to them. That, he said, is why so many people put on a happy face, why they smile for cameras, laugh in interviews, walk the red carpet like everything's fine. Because if they don't, the vault opens, and what's inside gets released. He made it clear that Diddy rarely makes threats himself. He doesn't have to, Cube explained. The system around him takes care of that. Publicists, journalists, producers, even stylists, they're the messengers. His hands stay clean, but the pressure still hits. It comes at you from every direction, Cube said. The moment someone tries to step back, the backlash begins. Gossip sites turn hostile. Old investigations get dusted off. Forgotten rumors suddenly resurface. Next thing you know, you're being labeled unstable, unprofessional, too risky to hire. He told the jury that Jamie experienced that exact kind of takedown the moment he began pulling away. Out of nowhere, it's health concerns. Whispers start flying. He's not dependable. He's unraveling. But that wasn't the truth, Cube said. Jamie was breaking free. And they don't like when someone runs. His voice lowered. He adjusted the microphone slowly, eyes scanning the jury. The courtroom had grown noticeably still, as if the truth itself had changed the temperature in the room, drawing the breath from the walls. I went to one, Cube said quietly. Only once. He explained it happened in the early 2000s. No flashy invite, no press alert. Just a discreet message, a name, a time, and a car waiting outside his hotel. They called it a networking night. That's always the cover. Cube said the vehicle took him to a sprawling estate in Beverly Hills. The gate shut behind him the moment he entered. His phone was taken at the door. But it wasn't a party, he said. It was something else. He described dim lighting, no music, just a quiet, unsettling atmosphere. Conversations were hushed. Security guards stood in every corner. And then there were the rooms, none of them marked. Just doors. Some slightly open. Some closed, with eerie, unplaceable sounds coming from behind them. Cube said he recognized faces, big names. Some looked disoriented. Others looked genuinely afraid. Then he saw something he could never unsee. There was a man I looked up to, he said. One of the biggest names in the industry. Slouched on a couch, eyes wide open. And someone had a camera aimed directly at him. That was enough. Cube said he didn't say a word. No goodbyes, no questions. He simply turned around, walked out, and got back into the waiting car. The next day his phone rang. No caller ID. When he answered, the voice on the other end said just one thing. We saw you leave. Nothing else ever happened. But he never returned. Because I understood exactly what that was. Cube said, that wasn't a party. That was a setup. Then he turned his gaze directly toward Diddy. You didn't just ruin lives, he said. You made sure to film them first, Cube said flatly. The judge had to call for a recess. Reporters sat frozen, some visibly shaken. Diddy's attorney leaned in, whispering urgently into his ear, but he didn't react. He just stared forward, jaw clenched, because for once the cameras weren't his. By the time Cube reached this part of his testimony, the room no longer felt like a courtroom. It felt like something else entirely, like a place where truths long buried were finally being unearthed. A confession chamber, a reckoning. Even Diddy's legal team had gone quiet, no more objections. There was no salvaging what had already been exposed. And Cube wasn't done. They didn't just try to shut Jamie up, he said. They tried to wipe him out. He looked to the jury and added, in this town, they don't ask you to stay quiet. They expect it. It's not random, Cube said. It's a system, pressure applied with precision. Patterns so clean they make it look like someone just faded out. But behind the curtain, it's calculated, surgical. He told the jury that after Jamie distanced himself from those circles, the fallout was immediate. Projects he was locked in for gone. Whispers started circulating. Stories came out of nowhere. One day he was celebrated. The next branded as unreliable, difficult, a problem. Cube paused, letting that last word settle. They love that one, he said. Problematic. Then he looked the jury in the eye. That's industry code for, he said no. He reached into a folder and pulled out a document, Jamie's professional schedule from 2019 to 2021. At first it just looked like a list. But Cube pointed out a string of cancellations. One after another, no explanations, just vanishing opportunities. All the cancellations, Cube said, traced back to executives linked either directly or quietly to Bad Boy Revolt TV or one of Diddy's many shell companies. Coincidence, he asked. Not likely. He went on to describe how Jamie's Netflix projects were quietly delayed. Scripts he was signed on to produce suddenly got tied up in legal red tape. Longtime creative partners, people he'd built careers with, stopped replying to his calls altogether. And then, Cube said, voice lowering, came the health scare. He looked down for a second, gathering himself, then looked back up. You think that just happened? That a guy like Jamie fit sharp in the middle of shooting just drops out of nowhere, and it just happens to follow the moment he started speaking up about what he'd seen. Cube didn't point fingers outright. He didn't need to. The message was clear in the silence between his words. He knew what it looked like, and so did everyone listening. I can't tell you exactly what happened in that hospital, Cube said, but I know what fear looks like, and I know what retaliation feels like. That wasn't just a health crisis, it was a warning. Cube told the jury that Jamie wasn't being targeted simply for what he said, but for what he refused to become: a puppet, a spokesperson, a controlled asset. He said Jamie was given multiple opportunities to come back into the fold. They dangled roles in front of him, promised glowing press coverage. All he had to do was play along, smile for the cameras, shake a few hands, pretend none of it ever happened. But Jamie wouldn't play the part. And that's when things escalated. That's when they started looking to replace him, Cube said. That's when those clone rumors took off. When people started wondering out loud if he was even still alive. He paused, then added, "That's the playbook. That's what they do. They break you down," Cube said quietly, "bit by bit, until even the people who love you don't know what's real anymore." His voice lowered further. That's how they hold on to power, not through fear alone, but through erasure. Then he leaned in slightly, his eyes scanning the jury. "There's something y'all need to really understand," he said, as the room leaned in with him. "This was never just about music. And it was never just about the parties." He glanced toward the prosecution, making sure they were listening. "This is about shaping culture," he said. "They don't just influence what you hear, they mold what you believe, what you fear, who you think you're supposed to be." Cube went on to explain that Hollywood, at least the part controlled by them, isn't just an industry. It's an engineered system, a machine that takes identity pain defiance and turns it into a product. One they sell back to the public dressed up as entertainment. "You think this is all about freedom? About self-expression?" Cube asked, shaking his head. "No, it's scripted. Every chart-topping album, every blockbuster film they greenlight, it's all intentional." He let that sit for a second. Then he dropped the line that made the entire room shift. "The same people promoting prison music own the prisons." Cube explained that this wasn't just his theory, it was something Tupac had tried to warn the world about. Before he was silenced, before he got too outspoken, before he began calling out the true architects behind the scenes. He told the jury that Diddy wasn't just complicit, he was a pipeline. A selected figurehead chosen to glamorize a culture designed to consume the very people it claims to uplift. And those who refused to play along, they vanished from the spotlight. No radio play, no billboards, no label funding. "You rap about building something real," Cube said. "You get shelved. You speak about healing. Suddenly you're corny." Cube went further, claiming that artists who spoke about spirituality or challenged the industry's narrative didn't just get ignored, they got targeted. Studios raided files, wiped bank accounts frozen, he said. It wasn't about music, it was about control. He explained that the parties tied to Diddy weren't just wild celebrity gatherings, they were tests. Carefully curated environments where cameras were always rolling. Those rooms were designed to see who would comply, Cube said. If you played the game, you got protection. If you didn't, you got set up or erased. He brought up a well-known singer who once turned down a deal with Bad Boy after being invited to one of those parties. Not long after the narrative shifted. She was branded unstable, her record deal vanished, and her name quietly disappeared from the lineup of every major award show. That's how it works, Cube said. Step out of line and they make sure the world forgets you. You really think she just lost control? Cube asked. No, that was calculated. That was punishment, plain and simple. Then he turned back to the jury and said what no one else in that courtroom had dared to voice. You're all sitting here trying to piece together what Diddy did. But that's not the real question. The real question is, how many people helped him do it? And just like that, the trial shifted. It wasn't just about Diddy anymore. It became a reflection of the system, of the complicity of the silence that allowed it all to happen. The judge asked if Cube wanted to share any final words. He nodded, stepped down from the stand, and walked slowly to the center of the courtroom. Then he turned to Diddy, locking eyes. "You built your empire on the backs of people too afraid to speak," Cube said. "You called it success. But it was built on chains." Diddy didn't flinch. He sat, frozen color drained from his face, eyes fixed on Cube, with nothing left to say. Cube wasn't finished. "You didn't just host parties," he said. "You built cages, mental ones, emotional ones. And then you filled them with people who thought they were being celebrated, when really they were being captured." He turned to face the courtroom gallery. "To every artist watching this, to every young person chasing a dream in music or film, ask yourself this: who's standing at the door of that dream, who's holding the key, and what will they demand from you before they let you in?" He paused, took a breath. "I stayed silent for a long time," he admitted, "because I thought silence would protect me. I thought keeping my head down meant I was safe." Then he turned back to the jury. "But here's the truth: silence doesn't protect you. It makes you part of it. It makes you complicit." He opened the folder he had carried in from the start, pulling out a single photograph. "This was me," he said, holding it up. 1991. Eyes full of hope. I believed I could change the industry, that I could create without losing who I was. He held up the photo for a long moment, then tore it cleanly in two. "That version of me," he said, "didn't make it. But the man standing here today, he's not afraid of any of you anymore." Cube returned to the witness stand, set the folder down gently, and looked directly at the judge. "I don't know what you'll decide after this," he said. "But now the truth is out. Now you all know." Then, turning back to Diddy one final time, Cube's voice cut through the silence. "And you thought no one would speak. You thought you had every angle covered. But guess what? That door you locked up tight, it's open now." He stepped down without another word, walking past the gallery, without glancing at the press, without looking back at the jury. And just as he reached the exit, he turned his head slightly and said quietly, "They didn't kill Jamie. They didn't kill me. They just gave us a bigger voice." And with that, Cube walked out of the courtroom. But what he left behind didn't fade. It reverberated, a truth too loud to be buried again. When Ice Cube walked out of that courtroom, he didn't just leave behind a testimony. He left behind a fracture in the facade, a crack in the glamorous, polished exterior of the entertainment world that for decades has sold itself as the pinnacle of freedom, creativity, and success. But what he exposed wasn't merely personal or procedural, it was systemic. A blueprint of control disguised as culture, a machine that doesn't just entertain, it engineers. This wasn't about celebrity drama. It wasn't about individual guilt. It was about a pattern, one that has existed in silence for far too long. Cube's testimony was less a bombshell than it was a mirror, held up to an industry, and by extension, a society that has allowed power to metastasize behind closed doors. What's most chilling isn't just the specific allegations, it's the structure behind them. A structure that rewards compliance, punishes resistance, and converts identity trauma and rebellion into marketable commodities. In the modern era, culture is currency, and those who control culture control more than just headlines. They control perception, behavior, and belief. Cube called it culture engineering, and he was right. When every major cultural product, songs, films, stories is filtered through the hands of a select few gatekeepers, we have to ask, who is shaping the collective psyche of the public, and to what end? The case of Jamie Foxx, as presented through Cube's eyes, reveals something deeper than a fallen star or a sabotage plot. It reveals how power isolates, how truth is often buried beneath labels like unreliable, difficult, or problematic. Not because people are those things, but because they stopped saying yes. In this industry, silence is enforced not with violence, but with erasure. One moment you're everywhere. The next you're gone, careers unceremoniously paused, projects inexplicably shelved, public narratives suddenly rewritten. And what of the audience? We're complicit too, though unknowingly. We consume what's presented to us, rarely questioning who curates it or why certain voices rise while others vanish. We laugh at the headlines, scroll through the gossip, call it entertainment, when it might be something else entirely. A distraction, a manipulation, a redirection of attention away from the real cost of fame in a system that doesn't care who you are, only what you're willing to give up. Cube's statement, "You built a kingdom out of other people's silence," isn't just about Diddy. It's about all systems that thrive on suppressed truth systems, that rely on complicity, that trade in fear and false freedom. And when Cube said, "Silence doesn't make you safe, it makes you a collaborator," he wasn't just confessing. He was indicting a culture of looking the other way. From a human standpoint, this story is also about trauma, the quiet kind. The kind you carry for years, pretending everything is fine. The kind that leaves you smiling on red carpets while screaming inside. And perhaps most tragically, it's about the loss of voice. The erosion of the self in exchange for survival. Fame in this context becomes a prison made of applause. Yet in speaking out, Cube reclaimed something that many never get back: agency. He turned testimony into transformation, grief into resistance. And in doing so, he challenged not just the courtroom, but every room where power hides behind prestige. The question now isn't just what happens to Diddy. It's whether we as a culture are ready to face the systems we've allowed to grow unchecked. Whether we're ready to ask who benefits from our silence, and who suffers when we choose not to listen. Because if stories like this can be buried in the heart of the spotlight, what else has been hidden in the dark?